Yes, I get a lot of questions from incoming LLM students, folks who are usually in the research stage, thinking of coming to the US or still exploring other schools or other countries. And I feel like there are mistakes you guys are fundamentally making. And so I figured I might as well do an episode addressing incoming LLM students. So if you are currently thinking about coming to the US, currently thinking about pursuing the masters, I think this episode is definitely for you. One thing that cuts across board is that a lot of you seem desperate, and so let's address all that in this episode today. So I don't mean to sound mean in this episode. So if you feel like I'm addressing you, nothing I say in this episode is personal, right? I'm doing everything from a place of I want you to do better. I want you to do your research before pursuing your LLM in any school. So let's just jump right on it. Let me tell you the 5 mistakes you guys are already making. And this is based on the questions I get in my LinkedIn inbox, on the channel, in the comment section. Number 1, a lot of you seem desperate, right? And so if you're desperate, let me tell you what's happening. You're not paying attention to the details. You don't know anything about work authorization. You think you're going to just arrive the US and life is just, you're going to be a baller. But it doesn't work that way, right? And so first thing I want to tell you is do not be desperate, right? I know it's easier said than done, but pay attention to the details. For me, when I was coming to the US, I was not paying attention to the details. My priority was just to pack my bags and land in the US, and then I'll figure it out from there. And the surprises that hit me, it was mind-blowing. I wish I paid attention. So pay attention to the details. The second mistake you're making is that you are not intentional about your choice of school or the choice of your LLM. I'm going to be doing an episode where I talk about like hottest LLMs to pursue. I've heard of folks who are pursuing LLMs, and this all ties down to the first point that I mentioned, that a lot of you are desperate and are not thinking about these things clearly, right? Your choice of LLM should be strategic, right? So it should be, you should really think about the big picture here. It's not about packing your bags and running to another country if you're not thinking about the big picture, right? So for example, I'm pursuing a master's, right? I was pursuing a master's. I'm no longer pursuing, right? I studied intellectual property law, but I've heard of folks studying very strange masters. You know, let me be honest with you. A lot of the US schools here just want to eat your money, right? And some of them will come up with very funny masters of, I don't want to mention anyone. But now I'm not saying this area should not be are not good, right? So there's no masters of law. Apologies for all my mistakes, but there are no masters of law that is wrong, right? But make sure it suits with your interest. Make sure you're paying attention to the bigger picture, which is why are you coming to the US? What is your game plan, right? Not just pursuing a master's in corporate sociology. I'm telling you, the masters I hear folks tell me about in my inbox, I'm like, where did you get this one, Bikonu? Right, so it's very important that you're paying attention, right? You're being intentional. You're asking folks questions. You're watching my YouTube videos. You're subscribing to the channel. Obviously, I'm going to, talk about my channel. But it's very important that you're doing these things, because if you're not, chances are that you're making a big mistake. Like, you might as well just stay back in your country and not do all that coming here, right? So pay attention to your specialization. Pay attention to the school, right? Don't just pick any school. I've done a lot of episodes here where I've talked about like how to pick your schools. Think about your interests. Think about how your school even matches with your area of specialization. These details are important. People who want to hire you, your future or prospective employers, pay attention to this, and they want to know that you are intentional. So if you're just like, oh, I just want to come to the US, oh gosh, let me just pursue a master's in corporate histography, there's nothing like that. But I'm just telling you, like, some of the masters, I'm like, when I go and research it and look it up, I'm like, even this one, I've not seen it before, right? So please pay attention and watch out for my episode where I talk about like the hottest LLMs or areas of specialization for lawyers, so that you know what to pick. One other mistake I think you're making is that you've not subscribed to this channel. Okay, I know. I'm at this point, you if you want, you can skip past this, but it's important, right? Why I say it's important, because I provide a lot of content. I have gone through this process, and so a lot of the work that I do is really about providing this support to you. and I don't get paid for it. But to you, to make sure that the mistakes that I made, to make sure that the mistakes that other folks and other colleagues of mine made, you don't have to make them. So please subscribe. Like this episode, subscribe. This is free. Like it and subscribe. A lot of you don't know this, but you have a lot of options, multiple options, and maybe you're not thinking about them, or you have thought about them and you've made a decision, right? There is Masters of Law, there is the Juris Doctor, right, which is like a doctor of law. These are folks, and I've said this so many times in my episodes, so please, in my other episodes, so please check them out. There is the JD students, Doctor of Law, who have who their law school program here is longer. It's like the law school in your country. It's like the university LLB, right, from your various countries, if that's what it's called, right? And so there is the JD, which you could take, and for some folks there is a combination of the LLM and the JD, so you can do an LLM and a JD together, right? These are options. Pay attention to these options, right? Don't just rush and say, oh, I'm going for an LLM. There's a reason why. So let me give you an example. For folks who are able to do LLM in the US, is typically 1 year, 9 months, right? And so if you watch all my episodes on work authorization, I tell you that immediately after that 1 year, you have only 1 year left to work in the US, and then you're supposed to figure out sponsorship, blah blah blah. Check that episode out. But then you also have the LLM and the JD. If you're able to combine this, sometimes that could be a 2-year program. And why is that important? A 2-year program means you have more time, right? Let me be honest, it means more money. It means more money, right? But there is that 2-year program can be very strategic, because if you're in school 2 years, you have more opportunities to do an internship, which is good and which heightens your prospects in getting a job. So if you do an LLM JD, let's be honest, it's going to be more expensive, but if you can afford it, that might be a route you want to go. Why? As I said, it can give you more time, number one. More opportunities, number 2. There are folks who come do an LLM here, and then after the first year of LLM, they then transfer to go and do a JD. Why? As I said, there are a lot of opportunities for JDs. So in some schools, the JDs get the bulk of the opportunities. So maybe combining your LLM and your JD and doing a 2 years program might be strategic and might be helpful to you. There is also an LLM and an MBA. Pay attention to these things is what I'm saying, right? I think I did an episode. I haven't posted this episode, but there's something very strategic about actually an LLM and an MBA, right? And one thing is that if that combination, if your MBA is seen as a STEM, you might actually get 3 years more, right? So as you know, I feel like I've said this so many times, but for LLMs or for folks who do STEM related masters, right? So engineering, science and stuff like that, they get 3 years, while lawyers and masters of law students get 1 year work authorization after their program. So if you combine your masters of law and your MBA, and I've seen this happen for one person, multiple people actually, right? But you need to make sure you are paying attention to this and looking at your school to see how an MBA is categorized. For some schools, an MBA is not a STEM, so you get only 1 year after. And for some schools, an MBA is actually a STEM course. And so typically those folks get about, I think, 3 years after their program. So that's why I'm telling you, you need to pay attention to these things. You need to pay attention to your options. Do you want to do an LLM? Do you want to do an LLM and a JD? Do you want to come here, do an LLM first and then transfer to a JD? Do you want to come and do an LLM and an MBA so that you get the benefit? If this is subject to the condition, let me be a lawyer at this point, but this is subject to the condition that your MBA is categorized as a STEM course. If it is, you might get that option of having 3 years after, right? So you need to be asking these questions, is what I'm saying. You need to be asking this question. Now, this is the biggest mistake I see folks making. And I'm laughing because each time I get this question, it makes me wonder, like, how? Why? Some of you think the moment you arrive here, you make it. you're just going to start working, you're going to make all the money, and you're going to like be a boss, and you use the money to pay your school fees. Once again, you are not paying attention to the details. You need to watch my episode where I talk about work authorizations, where you learn about CPT, OPT. Some of you think, the moment I land here, I'm going to start working in A&O, Allen and Overy, and then from there I'll move on to a bigger law firm. Like how is that going to happen? Like, it doesn't work that way, right? So there are immigration rules, visa rules, and I'm not saying overthink it. Now, this is a different bucket. There are some of you that now overthink it, and before you come here, you want to know too many details, right? So there's this fine line that you need my words leave my mouth, but there's this thin line of underthinking it and overthinking it. You need to find the balance, right? There are some folks that want to know all the details, and that paralyzes you. You're not even able to make a decision to come because you've paid attention to too many details. Let me be honest with you. Any leap from your country to the US is going to be a matter of faith. If you want to believe me, don't believe me. If you think you can write your whole plans down, A, B, C, D, E, F, and it's going to work that way, you lie, you joke. Because it doesn't work that way, right? It just doesn't work that way. Like, a lot of things is going to be about faith and not knowing all the details. But you can do some research. You can, to a large extent, reduce the number of unknowns, right? So basic things to know is about work authorizations. And I've said that's already on my channel where we talk about CPT, OPT. You also find it on a lot of other YouTube episodes. Thousands of YouTube channels also talk about like OPT, CPT, what's the difference and things like that. But know that the moment you get here, you're not just going to start working unless you're working on campus, right? You're not just going to come in and all of a sudden start working for a big law firm. You don't even have the bar, but you kind of think you're going to work for a big law firm. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't, right? So please do not overthink it, do not underthink it, but also don't be ignorant. I guess that's also what I'm saying. Do not be ignorant, right? Now, this is another one. I don't know. I hope you've checked out my episode where I talk about how to fund your Masters of Law. And I see that is actually one of the episodes that have the highest views on my channel. So I know it's important to a lot of you. But a lot of you are not paying attention to these numbers. Like, I see folks who would get... So I think I've told you people a bit about myself and how I got a master's in... And I applied to multiple schools. One school gave me I think the tuition for that school was $60,000, and I got a scholarship of only $6,000. So I had like $54,000 to pay. Now, if you're desperate, you would say, I'm going to just come, I'll figure it out when I get here. But that doesn't work, right? That doesn't work. You need to pay attention to those numbers, right? There are schools that give more funding. There are schools that are more liberal with their funding. I do not advise anyone to come to the US for a master's if your plan is to borrow, like to take a loan to pay your master's, and the tuition is so high, the interest rates on some of these things are mind-blowing. So you don't want to go for something where your tuition is so high, you're going to get a loan to pay the whole thing. The interest on some of these things can be mind-blowing, right? So you need to pay attention to the numbers. Don't be so excited when you hear, oh, you've been at that email you get, oh, we have just given you admission, we want to congratulations. No, right? Wash your eyes, look at the numbers. I know it sounds funny, but pay attention to the numbers. It's really, really important. And speak to people, right? Speak to people so that you know, does that make sense to pay with a loan? How would I pay this money, right? If you don't, you get here and you'll be frustrated, right? You get here and it just becomes even harder for you. So please pay attention to these things. Think about the numbers. Thank you so much for checking this episode out. I hope it was useful to you. I hope you feel encouraged. I hope you don't feel like, oh, she just called me out. No, I didn't call you out. But thank you so much for checking this episode out. Please pay attention to these details and look out for my next episode. Have a nice one, guys.